trauma, boundaries, triggered, manifestation, authentic. What do all these words have in common? If you said they're all buzzwords, ding, 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 you're correct. I like to call what we're in the buzzword era. Just kidding. I don't actually call it that. It's just a very catchy title that I thought fit the situation. But buzzwords do annoy the shit out of me. Pretty sure we all know what a buzzword is. The words that people like to throw into conversation to sound important or like they know what they're talking about, to try and prove a point, to emphasize something. The trendy, overused words that are just thrown around like it's confetti. I don't know how it got started, but in the beginning, I do feel like these words were brought up with the intent of bringing awareness, of normalizing the terms, of trying to help people work through some things. And somewhere along the way, they just ended up becoming catchphrases. And I get it. There are going to be words that end up becoming slang. They have a less serious meaning in the slang definition. They're thrown around and used frivolously. I'm talking about the situations where people are trying to prove some sort of point in an argument, and they're throwing around these big words, these big fancy words, because they think it makes them sound important, because they think it makes them sound like they know what they're talking about. And they're really just throwing out words that they've heard from social media, from their friends, and they have no idea what the hell it means. And as someone who surrounds their videos primarily around self-improvement, personal development, I come across these words a lot, whether it's in my comments or in my videos. And it's not so bad anymore, but I used to feel icky saying these words. Like, I remember I was typing up a comment to someone yesterday, and I had to use the word boundaries in my comment. And even though I know that I mean the true definition of boundaries in the context, and I know that person knows that I mean the true context of boundaries in their situation, it just still comes off as icky because these words have been overused, their meanings have been diluted, and it's almost like the words aren't even taken seriously anymore. I have had conversations with my husband surrounding different topics, whatever we saw on social media, something that's been in the news, and I've actually caught myself trying to say my arguments, say my opinions, say what I think about the topic, and avoid certain words. I've caught myself racking my brain for any other word that could describe what I'm trying to say. And then I ultimately end up telling him, okay, I really hate saying this, but trauma, boundaries, red flag, authenticity, manifestation, like, it feels gross. I end up using those words and I have to tell him, like, it sounds icky to say this, but this is what I mean. And I know he gets what I'm saying, because then our conversation ends up kind of switching gears and turning towards why that word sounds so overused and gross to say these days. I do feel like a bulk of the buzzwords we hear these days are in the mental health space, the personal development space, the self-help space. I kind of see them all as the same thing in a way. But those buzzwords aren't the only ones that I'm talking about, because I feel like there are buzzwords in all kinds of spaces, like the political space, obviously in social media, and even the workplace. It's just that, again, as a self-improvement, personal development kind of focused channel, those are the words that I mentioned earlier are the ones that I come across the most, that I probably interact with the most. That sounds so weird to say I interact with a word. I do also wonder if, because we now have all these buzzwords, is this also part of the reason why it seems like society as a whole has such difficulty in expressing themselves, because they're so used to using slang and buzzwords to try and drive home a point that they don't know how to use their words accordingly. to explain what they actually mean. And it also feels so fake whenever people are using buzzwords, like they're just putting on this performance and throwing around all these words that they know you've heard because you've been exposed to it via TV, via the internet, via social media. And so I feel like people take advantage of that. The fact that they know you've heard these words, but you may not necessarily know what it actually means or what it's supposed to mean in the correct context. And then they try and manipulate it and turn it around to work in their favor for whatever their argument is. And I just feel like what initially was good intent of trying to bring awareness to words, of trying to make mental health less taboo, of trying to normalize discussing things amongst people, has somehow ended up just becoming a menace to society. I do think it is important to allow people to use the words when they're trying to use them appropriately in the correct context. Again, I know that the person that I respond to where I had to use some buzzwords, they know what context I'm using them in. They know that I am using them appropriately and that I'm not just throwing around words for the sake of trying to sound like I'm smart or something. I am by no means a professional of any sort. I speak on my own experiences and what I've come to realize based off of those experiences, what lessons I've learned from those experiences. And that's what I draw from. These days, it almost feels like society has almost gotten into the habit of using these buzzwords as a scapegoat, as an excuse for whatever's going on in their lives, as an excuse for their behavior. I have no idea if we're going to be able to correct ourselves with the overuse of these words. And I'm sure more words will get added to the list as time goes by. But if we continue down this path, we're just going to have a language full of these overused, cheap words that don't have any depth to them anymore.